Welcome back to the Skift Travel Podcast. I'm Skift's editor-in-chief, Sarah Kopit, joined as always by Skift's head of research, Seth Borko. Hey, Seth, how you doing?
Hey, Sarah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
So today we're going to take a look at social commerce in the travel industry. It is big business and poised to get even bigger in 2025. But before we get into it, a quick reminder to send any questions or comments that you might have to podcasts@skift.com. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe this podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you're enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can spread the word about the Skift Travel Podcast. So today on the pod, we've got Jeremy Jauncey, the founder and CEO of Beautiful Destinations, to talk about all things social commerce. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey guys, thank you for having me.
You know, online travel booking has always been a bit fragmented, to use the industry term. I would call it a bit of a hot mess. But now we've got in-app purchasing on one hand, and we've got AI on the other hand. And it could just blow it all up, I think. It seems like a bit of a revelation. How do you see all of it unfolding from where you sit?
Yeah, so I think we're possibly in the most exciting time I've ever seen in my career in the travel industry. What's happening around us in terms of this explosion of technology and AI, how social is developing into a commerce engine, how people's behaviors are changing. I don't think we've seen it, and I don't think we've seen it move at the pace it is moving now. And so the excitement is incredibly high. I think we could probably, if we were to zoom out and look from a macro perspective, I think there are two driving forces that are making all these changes happening. And I think that might be relevant for us to talk about. One on the macro side is just the macro consumer. How are people discovering travel? How different is that? How are the tools which maybe traditionally travel marketers thought on the social world were just for top of the funnel and awareness? Like, how are they developing to becoming research tools, planning tools, and ultimately booking tools? And then from the industry side, how are we seeing these dynamics around what has been almost a 20-year kind of stranglehold from Google on the way that brands will get their message out into the world and advertise themselves? How is that changing when we're now in a world where you can create content for very low costs, you can work with creators and influencers to get your message out there, and you can actually start driving sales within a social environment without necessarily being beholden to paying that search dollar? So I think those two factors are maybe where we could start, and then we could sort of build on from that, because I think they're the driving things at the moment.
I do want to ask you, though, how you feel about TikTok, only because it's been so in the news, especially here in the United States. You're sat in Dubai right now, so perhaps not as I don't know. It was very much a thing when TikTok went dark here. Was it only a week ago?
In a way, I think it's very, very bullish for the space that we're in terms of social and the world of social commerce, just to see how influential it was and how much it was talked about when it was going offline. I don't know that anybody really knows what's going to happen or how this is going to play out, but I think based on the way consumers are now discovering not just travel, but all of the things in their life through social and buying things through social, consumers will move from TikTok to another platform if it gets shut down. It's just the way that they are. And I think we have some things we can talk about what's been happening in China and how that's a kind of leading indicator to what's going to be happening in the West in terms of how consumers understand and engage in social commerce. So I think it's fascinating. I love being on the outside of it and looking in and seeing how it's kind of playing out. But as I said, I think it's pretty bullish for what we're looking at in the social commerce space.
You know, it was interesting in my house because I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and future voters, not to bring it all back to politics, but future voters and future travelers, right? And so when TikTok went down, my daughter, the 10-year-old, she got up. I don't know if you saw the post that went up, like when it went dark, like what it actually said on the screen. She's like, "Oh my gosh, it actually happened." And she's like, "But Donald Trump is going to fix it." So okay.
I saw that.
She literally said it out loud. And I was like, interesting. Okay. So Seth, I bet you've been trying to say something for a while here, and I keep on talking. So go for it.
No. I think it's a fascinating story. I think it says a lot about messaging and influence, because the message on TikTok specifically said, "Don't worry, we got Trump on the case. We've got the president of the United States." I've just been fiddling with my ring light like an influencer, in the modern economy. So that's just all I'm working on. Now, I wanted to pull on this thread about social commerce because I think it's a big, really big deal. Bloomberg reported that TikTok, I think they were aiming. I don't know if they achieved it, and they did get banned towards the tail end of this fiscal period. But they were aiming for something like $17 billion of commerce sales in the United States.
Yeah.
So like, I guess the question, like, at the risk of sounding dumb, like, how is this working? How is social commerce different from like affiliate marketing, which has been around forever? And where is it working and where is it not working? That's a bunch of questions all at once at you,
Yeah,
Jeremy.
yeah, yeah. No, no,
But
no. Great questions. So maybe let's start with that macro context that I mentioned at the beginning, where people had traditionally seen social, and then we can move down the funnel to actually end in the transaction. So I think it's pretty widely accepted now in the travel industry that social is one of the most dominant, if not the dominant, discovery tool for the industry. You know, people are going to social in droves when they want to see where to travel, when they want to discover new destinations, when they want to see the ins and outs of a hotel, when they want to see what it's like to be on a cruise line. And that behavior is really relatively ubiquitous across industry. So it's been happening for a long time in fashion. It's been happening for a long time in beauty. It's happening in travel now in such a way that many, many people are leaning into that as their sort of default behavior. And a couple of big watershed moments, I think, certainly for me, having been in this space now for 10 years, was a couple of years ago when the Google executive at that Fortune conference said, look, as much as 40% of younger consumers are maybe not even going to Google Maps or Google Search anymore when they're looking for restaurants and things to do in a location, they are going to TikTok and they are going to Instagram. So I think given that the industry is now understanding that sort of top of the funnel awareness discovery phase of social, maybe what's changed in the last couple of years has been how further down the funnel behaviors have moved within social, and how this is maybe different, Seth, to your question around affiliate marketing. So with Beautiful Destinations, we have a huge community on social. 50 million people follow our channels, and post-pandemic, we saw a fascinating change in the way they were consuming content from us. Traditionally, what they were doing was they were going in, and the things that I'm sure we've all done when we're killing time, looking at beautiful waterfall videos and doing that sort of inspiration. I don't know where to go, but I'll pass the time. Almost like entertainment, watching this beautiful travel content. What we started to see post pandemic was that people were seeing those videos, saving those videos into collections on their app, and then sharing them via DM with each other and planning and having a conversation around that content in the way that maybe they would do when they were doing more traditional research that you'd expect off social platforms. So I would be saying to you guys, let's plan our trip to Mexico. Here's 5 videos of the places we can stay. And here's 5 videos of the experiences we can do. And here's the things that are going to happen to us when we go there, and plan that whole trip through video. Now, that was a really big change in the way consumers were using social. And we started to see it validated on the business side as well, where travel agents would reach out to our Instagram and say, my client has sent me 5 videos from Beautiful Destinations Instagram and asked me to book that trip. And so you start to see those leading indicators. And for us, it just became very, very obvious that consumers were not just coming into social to discover content at the top of the funnel. They were gravitating around the DM and the sharing tools that are now really, really powerful within the platforms. And they were moving further down. So the connection that we then see, which is where I think we're excited about the future, is to look at some of the platforms in China where they have been really integrating commerce into their experience. And if we can learn anything from what's happened there, the commerce engine is going to come to the Western social networks for travel. It's already there in fashion. It's already there in beauty. We can definitely talk about considered purchases and how much harder it is in travel. Yeah.
you've literally taken the considered to the almost exact words out of my mouth, where we know that travel is an incredibly high consideration, high ticket purchase. A trip is, an average trip is can be a couple $1,000, whereas fast fashion from Shein can be $15. So that's very low consideration, very low ticket, and that's why, like, I guess just jump. I mean, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but like, I'm very skeptical that someone will click to book a $2,000 trip on.
Yeah.
On social media. You know what I mean? Like right now, I know there is click to book for, you see, there's a purse that went viral, I think, and like people just buy, but that costs $25.
Actually, Seth, I agree with you. I think that's exactly true. And I think the narrative is not, certainly from my perspective, is not the person's going to see the hotel and book it immediately. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think social will ever be the place that that does happen. But understanding that social becomes much more integrated into that whole booking experience, such that by the time the tools and the platforms that are, I think, moving in that direction, make it much easier for you to do everything through the app, like we see in China with WeChat, where you have that connected payment ecosystem. I just think it's a matter of time before that ease and the consumer who becomes so conditioned to shopping through social moves into making that travel transaction. And I mean, maybe Sarah, you mentioned with your daughters who are maybe digital and social native. I don't think in 10 years' time, when they're planning their post-college vacations, they're going to be booking it in the same way that we're booking it today.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, all it takes is doing it once and it worked. And that, we saw it going all the way back to like the late 90s with, I mean, I don't know, you both are probably too young to remember, but that whole like how I'm going to put my credit card like on the internet, like that was a thing, right? And of course, that was very easily overcome as soon as credit cards and like the safety protections of identity theft. As soon as basically it was the credit card companies. As soon as the credit card companies figured out how to fix that and give people the confidence that, if something goes wrong, we got you. I think the same is coming, to your point, for social.
The guy who figured that out with PayPal went on to do something else, right? I think the PayPal
Yeah,
guy.
Just a little bit. Just
yeah, he might have done something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we sort of touched on those macro forces where there's a consumer element, which I think is really interesting to dig a little bit deeper into, where consumers now, when they plan travel, they expect rich video to be a part of that experience. It makes so much sense when you look in hindsight that travel was going to be so influenced by social media, because our product is so inherently visual. It really is so focused on that escapism and that real kind of moment of joy when you buy it. And I think if you look at the last sort of 20 years, where we've almost been conditioned to take that out of our booking experience, the OTAs have done a fantastic job moving an offline industry online, but certainly haven't really taken into consideration how it is that a consumer wants to experience that travel booking process. It's much more fun for me to sit down with my wife and look through amazing videos as we do our holiday planning than it is to go directly onto a booking site, which doesn't show me video content, gets me, basically as quickly as possible through that kind of booking process. And so I think as more and more consumers lean into expecting that experience, we'll see that kind of driving the industry. But on the platform side, I think you're also seeing some really exciting changes. One is, I think, an economic force, which is the OTAs for the last 20 years, as we mentioned at the start, have been spending tens of billions of dollars to acquire customers in search. The efficacy of search is proven, it's effective, it's there, but it's a numbers game. And you will see, if you look at the earnings reports of the big OTAs, that as they spend a dollar, they need to continue spending that dollar to acquire that customer. And that's why they're such big spenders. And in that world, obviously Google kind of is the true winner. So any force that might enable an OTA or a supplier of travel to move further up the funnel, to get closer to the consumer without having to fight with each other in the world of Google, I think is only a good thing for them. And equally, we're seeing it from the hoteliers who are coming out and saying, well, actually, we want to invest in social because we want direct transactions coming to us and not have to pay sort of intermediaries. So you've got these suppliers of travel on the one hand who are going, okay, maybe social really could be a channel that I get into. And as it starts to enable commerce more, can I sell more? Does that then mean that I start to market more heavily through the social channels? Certainly we're seeing that, and we believe that's the direction that kind of travel is going. So those are the two forces, Seth, that I think get us a little bit faster to that place where people feel more comfortable buying travel on social.
You talked about Expedia potentially, booking potentially, OTAs moving higher in the booking funnel and more into the influence state of things. It's interesting you say that, because I thought this conversation was about them moving lower in the funnel and more about enabling social commerce as a platform. And I assumed the people who would have the ultimate trust would be the creators, would be individuals. I don't see how Expedia can replace. I think Expedia moves lower in the funnel. The creators move higher in the funnel. They own the customer, and Expedia enables the booking. But you're kind of saying, you kind of just said something different. You said, Expedia becomes the influence platform. Maybe just tease that out a little bit more. Where am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I think both absolutely happen. I really think that's where we're going. So, on the one hand, what you're seeing, let's talk about Expedia. I think massive credit to them because they launched travel shops, right? And they stepped out and they were the first guys to really say, we believe in the power of social commerce. We believe in taking creators that are great at making content, are ultimately driving transaction and enabling them to drive commerce, and in many ways get accreditation and revenue for the travel that they're driving. So I think you're seeing both things happen because in that regard, I think over the next year or two, we're going to see more and more people on the OTA side of things announce partnerships where rich video will be in their booking experience. Travel shops and things like that will expand. We saw Klook's partnership with TikTok, which was also fascinating, coming out and trying to bring those two things together.
Wasn't Klook's partnership with TikTok mostly affiliate marketing though? Like it was a very classic, hit my link in the bio, you get a little URL, you get a credit. That to me, I know it's exciting and it was cool, but it wasn't particularly innovative from a tech perspective.
That I think is absolutely fair. And I think that is probably where we stand right now today. And I think that's the reality from a technical standpoint, because these are big, very, very established platforms that are hard to change, which then I think sort of gives more credence to your argument around how the creator can innovate and how the creator can set that up, because it is becoming easier and easier for creators to monetize themselves and to really join the dots between the influence and the impact they have on selling travel and then actually selling their own products. So I think we're going to live in a world very, very soon where the social platforms are rolling out more tools for creators to be able to drive direct transactions. And whether that's an affiliate enabled system where they ultimately transact on an OTA, or whether it is creators that have that much sway and that much power in their audience that they're going direct to the suppliers and they're saying let's do things together, let's work out how we can integrate. And so I just think that there's a really exciting dynamic at play right now where everyone in the ecosystems seems to be incentivized to be leaning into this space.
I'm curious, who do you think, from a platform perspective, who do you think is doing it the best, enabling commerce? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it Klook? Or anyone else?
Yeah, so definitely at the front are Instagram and TikTok together. I think the OTAs still have. I mean, I think credit to them because it's not their core business, right? That's not what they do. They are moving in those directions, and I think, like I said, credit to Expedia and Klook and others that are leaning that way. And actually, when you did your conversation with Steve from Kayak, I thought it was fascinating hearing him say, actually, we're looking potentially at social really being a driving channel for us, and he was almost flipping the dynamic and saying that they were looking at social almost like performance marketing, which I think is really progressive to hear from kind of leaders of platforms like that. So I think those guys are really pushing hard to get there quickly, but the eyeballs and the attention are on the Instagrams and the TikToks and the YouTubes, and they're the ones that are really enabling creative monetization. Now, I am obviously very bullish about this, but I will put a caveat in there, which is that the counter side to that argument is, again, if you look macro and you look at how these platforms make money, and ultimately you look at the fact that they're public companies, they still make money on advertising, which means they are still very heavily incentivized to keep the user on their platform and watching content. And the more content that they watch, the higher ad load they can deliver. And so I don't think we will ever see a full enable system where Instagram's like, okay, cool, I'll jeopardize my advertising dollars because I'm happy for you to push your things into other places. The only I think caveat to that, I think, Seth, it goes back to your point a little while ago, was the dollars in travel are so high. And if I sell a $5,000 trip and I'm sharing some of that with Instagram, you have to sell a heck of a lot of t-shirts or lipsticks to get even close to sort of doing that. So I think the economics obviously end up being pretty influential in this, but I think we will see those platforms doing more to enable creators.
So we're going to take a quick break now, but on the other side, I want to talk about YouTube. Welcome back, everybody, to the Skip Travel Podcast. So we talked a lot about TikTok and Instagram, but we haven't talked about YouTube. You just brought YouTube up. Where do they fit into this ecosystem?
Yeah, I think they're equally as important. And I think, again, let's look at it through two lenses. On the travel marketing side, when you are a DMO or a hotel or you're selling anything in travel, it is in our opinion, the single most important investment you can make in your marketing now is understanding just how that mix has changed. So 10 years ago, when we started the business, a lot of what we'd hear from the CMOs was this adage, which I'm sure you're familiar with: 80% of my marketing budget goes towards media, 20% of my budget goes towards content. And I will always overspend on advertising, more so than I will on content. That dynamic has shifted so much now, because I think the really forward-thinking CMOs are realizing that content is an investment in the long term. You need so much content, particularly short form video content, to be constantly relevant on these platforms. And so we've seen budgets move much more heavily into that continuous creation of content. And we've almost seen that kind of parallel path where the efficacy of pure play advertising has been going down. Consumer trust in pure play advertising has been going down. And Seth, to your earlier point, the rise of trust in influential and trusted voices actually to buy from has sort of been going up. So I think when we look at something like YouTube in light of the other platforms, the main thing to focus on is how, as a marketer, are you making content for those platforms, and how is it different to the other ones? Because in our world, Instagram is much more of a brand awareness, brand building, focus on the beauty and the narrative at the sort of top of the funnel. TikTok is a much more raw, authentic, POV based piece of content. You wouldn't put highly cinematic, beautiful filmmaking stuff on TikTok. It wouldn't perform. And YouTube is somewhere in the middle, but leaning a little bit more heavily towards longer form sort of storytelling and educational content. And stuff like the content that we're making right now would work great on YouTube and LinkedIn, and possibly wouldn't be as engaging on an Instagram or a TikTok. And so it sort of levels the playing field out when you understand what kind of content you need to make for what platform. But I do think YouTube plays a huge role, and will play a huge role in this whole kind of ecosystem that we're talking about.
For brands, though, that are engaging with these platforms, I guess this is nothing new, but they have to take a big leap in terms of putting their trust in the creators. And creators are not always incentivized to show destinations in their best light. They're incentivized to get clicks and views. And there's plenty of YouTubers that are happy to make a video about the worst hotel in Japan and this scam in wherever. Like, how does, like, some of that can be, I think in the long run, like, there's sort of, I think there's a couple of risks for brands that are using YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we think about the world is sort of split into two, creators and influencers. And maybe we start with influencers. We think about
What's the difference?
Yeah. So we think about them as analogous to media in many ways. And this is how we'd really encourage people to think about them. When you think about working with the right kind of influencers, you would analyze them in a way that perhaps, when we were growing up in media, we would analyze a publication, like, who's its audience, what's their reach, does it fit with my brand ideals, can they make content that will reflect the stuff that aligns with my audience? And so when I work with that influencer, I feel as though I'm reaching the right audience, and I can relatively easily do a comparison where, I buy a certain amount of media on the New York Times or on, BBC Travel, I get this amount of reach to this kind of audience. That's sort of quite analogous, we think, to how you look at influencers. When you look at creators, which is the driving force of our business and where we see the world sort of really moving, these individuals for us are akin to production and creative companies. And so we're coming at a world where travel brands are used to hiring big production companies, big creative agencies, having 100 people going on a shoot, taking 3 months to plan, putting out one big campaign a year, and then taking that campaign that they ran on TV or broadcast and cutting it down and putting it on social. That world really for us is changing so rapidly that by enabling creators who know how to talk to an audience, but in one person, they are the director, they are the graphic designer, they do the sound design, they do the post-production, they do the editing end to end. And some of them also have an audience as well. You have all of that value sort of baked in together. And so when we make that separation, I think for us then what we try to lean into is to answer your question about how you essentially make sure you're getting the most value. You have some kind of translation layer in the middle, which could be an agency business like ours. It could be built in-house, but it's some marketing professional capability that knows how to take a business objective, take a business brief, and then translate it in a way that can then unleash the power of these creators. And ultimately, the goal is to reduce the amount of money that you spend on making content, increase the speed that you do it, and increase the scale that you do it at. And it's those kind of pieces together that then enable this social commerce world that we think we're moving towards.
So tell me a little bit more about beautiful destinations for our listeners out there who aren't familiar with you. What is your model, and how's it evolved like over the past 10 years?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I'll start actually with a massive thank you to Skift. Really, I don't know if you guys know, but it was Jason and Rafat that really kind of gave me the first opportunity to get up in front of the industry, and it's nearly 10 years ago now. They allowed me to come to Skift Global Forum. They allowed me to give a talk about influencers, and I began the conversation. It was the first time I'd ever spoken to the industry. I began the conversation by honestly asking the audience, how many people in the room have an Instagram account? That's where we were kind of back then. And, thankfully people sort of put their hand up. But the starting point for us was we saw over 10 years ago that social media was enabling as a cultural phenomenon, and people were turning to social media in a way that we'd never seen them adopt media before. And we just believed that we were going to be moving in the direction of a place where the travel industry, which was so focused on visual storytelling and maybe hadn't been because of the dominance of OTAs and because of optimization and technology, maybe there'd be a place to bring that back into a marketer's marketing mix. And back then, there was no such concept as being a creator. There was no social commerce. There was no way to make money in this industry. And so what we realized relatively quickly was if we could prove value by being marketing and strategy guys and connect the dots between this growing creator economy and the need for brands, and tourism boards and hotels and so on to have content, that there could be a business to be built. And so a parallel path to that was really working out how we would grow our audience. And so we essentially do three things today. One is strategy. So helping our clients understand the world of content, the world of social, the world of the creator economy. That's sort of phase one. Phase two then is content, and the vast majority of our businesses is content. And really that's the message that we push. Like, you need to be making more content. You can make it at a lower cost than you're doing it today. It needs to be short form, viral video. And if you do it right and you put it onto social, then you don't need to spend as much on advertising. You can build your own organic audiences. Ultimately, you can drive sort of social commerce. And that's the second part of our business. And then the third part is, as we were building our content agency, we grew a social audience. Like, we applied our strategy to ourselves, and we said, we're not going to spend a single dollar on advertising or marketing. We're going to apply everything that we're preaching to the market about content. We're going to make our own content, and we're going to build our own audience. And now, as I said, it's 50 million people across all the platforms, and we use it as a way to then help our clients get their messages out on social. That's how our business works.
So from your strategy side, which is sort of what we've been talking a lot about, I know you've been very focused also on informing your clients about what's next coming down the pike. And for that, I know you often look to Asia. And we touched on this a little bit at the top of the conversation, but from what I understand, it's wild out there. Like, there's a lot going on. What do you see in Asia that you think, if you're here in the Western world at a travel marketer, that you need to be like prepared for?
Yeah, so I think broad strokes, China in particular has been a few years ahead of us in the West when it comes to social commerce, and their adoption of mobile and their use of mobile in day-to-day is largely enabled by this super app concept that we've all heard about, this fully integrated news, social, communication, music, payments capability in one place. And so what we see as consumers actually find it very, very easy to go from inspiration to purchase of things on platforms like WeChat and others. And so as we've seen that move into the West, I think, again, you brought it up at the beginning of the conversation, we've seen social commerce, which at the moment is only about 10% of the commerce that's happening across the social platforms. It's only about 10% of their revenues. We've seen it in the fast fashion, in these low cost, low consideration items. But what we haven't truly seen it happen at scale yet is within travel, but in China it has. We started researching pretty heavily a few years ago and came across a business called Mafengwo. I don't know if you guys have really spent too much time with them, but if you break it down into its kind of simplest components, they've taken a video-driven social discovery layer, built on top of Trip.com pipes, like that engine is Trip.com, and they've just joined the dots in a way that we're discussing hypothetically. They've done it, and they're now one of the second, I think they're the second largest driver of travel in China. And really what they've done is they've given the consumer what it is they're looking for, which is rich vertical video about travel experiences. And they've fulfilled that transaction with a trusted and highly successful scaled sales platform. And so I think that's coming. And I think you see Expedia travel shops and you see sort of the movement that's coming from the OTAs leaning more into that. Where I think the disconnect happens today, which is why I'm kind of predicting that over the next year or two, we're going to see more of these suppliers of travel and OTAs leaning into video content, is that they've never made content themselves, really. Like, this is where I think we're going to see a big change. We're going to see these guys launching video platforms in the way that we've seen Ma Fengwo do it so successfully.
So it's Trip.com is the actual pipes behind this.
Yeah.
What is the plum in America, in the West, America and Europe? What do you think the plumbing would look like? It would be Expedia and Booking, or it would be someone that doesn't. Would it be a global distribution system like Amadeus or Sabre? Would it be Expedia or Booking? Would it be someone else that doesn't exist today? Like, who is the plumber for this social commerce revolution, to ask it in an incredibly unsexy way?
It's a great question. I think the most likely plumber is one of the OTAs. At least I think it should be, because they are the most trusted, because they have that distribution already, and because they have that engine to very efficiently drive a transaction. I think that you will never be able to out transact the OTAs. We've seen plenty of stories in the graveyard over the years where people have set up to try and build their own OTAs. Culture Trip was a great example. Great brand, great business, great product starting. You raise $100 million to build an OTA, and that doesn't even touch the sides. So I don't think someone's going to come up and build a brand new OTA. And we'll touch on AI in a second, because I think there's a whole world of how AI is going to enable travel. But I think most likely is an OTA. Now, a slightly out of left field prediction could be one of the hoteliers. One of the hoteliers who want to drive to .com, who says, actually, we're going to implement a fully enabled social commerce booking team. We're going to go and work with a bunch of creators or people who really understand the content space, and we're going to stand up our own engine that will drive traffic direct to us. I think that's possible. I think individual creators, having been one myself in my earlier career and spent so much time in that space, I don't really think there's a desire to step up and actually build that, because managing customer service, managing all of the issues that come with a very, very complex transaction is really not what creators are best at. That's not really what they want to be doing.
But you haven't mentioned at all one of the B2B players like a Sabre or an Amadeus. You think they're out of the game because creators just don't know who they are?
I mean, I'd absolutely say that. I think creators do not know who they are, absolutely. And historically, accessing their APIs is a pretty guarded club, right? It's not like they pump it out in the way that you're seeing now with the OTAs, and that's actually really fascinating from a tech standpoint, because 5 years ago the OTAs were not as open with their APIs as they are now. And I think they're living in a world where they're realizing that there's so much competition for that transaction that they need to enable partners that maybe traditionally that they wouldn't. But I don't know that I can stand up a quick and nimble engineering team and plug into a Sabre or Amadeus infrastructure. I just don't think that that's possible today. And I don't know the leadership. I don't know what their plans are. I haven't really listened into any of their updates, but I'm not sure that would be top of mind for them right now.
I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on one of the big buzzwords from 2024, probably going into 2025 too, but overtourism. A lot of the destinations really think that social media and influencers and creators, like let's just take Spain, for example. That was, one of the biggest lightning rods of last summer, water guns and protests and all of that. So basically you've got a bunch of influencers and creators who go to one place in one country, and then all of a sudden the whole rest of the world shows up there, and chaos ensues, right? So what do you think about that? Do you think that social commerce can send travelers like to other places in Spain to kind of spread the love a little bit? Or
100%, and they honestly have to. And again, it's maybe a little bit self-serving because it sort of aligns with my business's interest, but that's exactly what we have to do. We have to join the dots between the destination developers, whether it's the hoteliers, the real estate developers, the private equity firms that are funding the growth of these infrastructures, the local town planners, the tourism boards, the government officials. We have to join the dots with those guys and girls to educate them on how to work best with creators. And equally, creators have to be able to say, well, actually, I am looking for new and innovative content. I don't want to go to the place where everybody is. And Barcelona is such a good example because within 45 minutes train ride of Barcelona, you have some of the most unbelievable scenery and towns and places you can go that people just don't know about. And maybe you could argue that the tourism boards in those locations haven't taken creators seriously and so haven't invested in building and bringing them out. Maybe you could argue that the creators themselves haven't done the work to go and find out where these new and emerging places are, and they've just defaulted to the easy places. But that's something we push really hard. This regional dispersion idea and helping land destinations is something that we feel a responsibility to do, and actually we actively try to do. So if you go onto our social media channels, you will absolutely see the Santorini cliffs and the pink skies in Bali and all that stuff. But you will also see a lot of emerging destinations, and we feel really good and really proud about being able to push stuff like that. So Albania, emerging destination, sponsor of ITB this year. It's been a year and a half where we've been going and finding content about them, putting them on the channels. Kazakhstan, same again, some of the most amazing nature experiences that you just would never have known about had it not been for these amazing videos that us and others have been putting on social. And I think it's exciting because it's there. It's just about joining the dots between the people that have the assets to promote and the people that can help promote it, and that's kind of the role that we like to play.
What about, there's, I think, a couple criticisms. There's many criticisms of social media.
Yeah,
one is over tourism. Another one, there's a famous like Simpsons joke, like old man yells at clouds, and perhaps I'm just being an old man yelling at a cloud, but like spontaneity. I feel like sometimes social media robs a trip of its spontaneity. You've already been, in a sense, you've already seen. I kind of had that experience. I went to Japan. You start scrolling, all of a sudden you look at one Japan video, all of a sudden your entire feed for the next 2 months is Japan. Then you actually get there and I'm like, I saw this already. Oh, that's the thing I saw. And I was a little disappointed, and I almost wish I had some delayed gratification. And we're seeing social media detox. We're seeing these sort of things. How do you think about the industry addressing those junk food kind of complaints? Like it feels good in the moment, but it's not good for me.
No, it's fair. I mean, it's very fair, to be honest with you. And I mean, I think it's made, even if we really to put a finer point on it, the social platforms have got so good at targeting content that's relevant to you. I think it's within sort of 2 or 3 video views that TikTok can send you a relevant video based on what you're interested in. So I think from a consumer standpoint, it's hard. I mean, it's hard. They're only going to get better. They're only going to show you more and more stuff. So I don't know that, honestly, I have a solve for that. I think on the industry side, it just plays more into this narrative of increasing the breadth and quantity of content that you make, really, because I think a lot of destinations, I don't think they're making enough content. And so the same content gets seen over and over and over. And maybe in your Japan example, you just got inundated with like cherry blossoms content, which the tourism board has enabled. And there's loads and loads of that, or the Shinjuku crossing, or these iconic things that we've seen so many times. And I think if there's a broader array of content being made and seen, then hopefully your experience can be a bit more diverse. But yeah, I mean, the platforms are getting good at, sending you stuff.
So I'm curious, have you ever booked a trip solely because of what you've seen on social media? I know it's kind of hard for us because, we see so much all the time, but has that ever happened to you?
It absolutely has. And I think I've found it for me most helpful with boutique hotels. And there's a couple of reasons why. What we found is that the boutique hotels who are a little bit more innovative with their marketing budgets, and maybe it's starvation makes them innovative, and maybe it's just necessity. But what we found is that these boutique hotels have invested more in content and more in creators, and essentially what it's enabled them to do is there are a whole host of small, independent, family-run hotels that have millions of followers on social media and are driving tens of millions of views on these unique experiences they've created, that were they to have been sitting within the corporate head office of a big hotel brand, would have had to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of media dollars to get that kind of reach. So on the one hand, I think that's really empowering for the industry and the hotel industry in general. But it's also meant that me as a consumer, I've been able to discover amazing properties through social media and actually then have gone in and booked them. And in most of these cases, we've been able to message them through social and actually book direct. So that's been a sort of live example on the hotel side. Where I think we've also seen some low-hanging fruit is in the experience economy and in experiences. And the partnership you guys have done with Get Your Guide was amazing, because I feel like you guys came together and just opened up this narrative about how the experience economy was changing and the opportunity there in experiences. I think those products lean themselves very, very heavily towards a social commerce enablement, which means that you can really experience. You can see the experience for what it really is in a much, much better way than maybe reading a long paragraph about it. So I've also booked experiences through social.
100%.
Any hotels in particular that we need to know about that you want to shout out? Like, what was the best boutique hotel on Instagram or TikTok?
Yeah. I'd say one of the favorites would be Forestas in the Dolomites, which I would never have discovered had it not been through Instagram. I don't know if you guys have seen that property or you've heard about it, but have a look at their Instagram account, and it's unbelievable. And it's a small hotel that, again, would have to have paid a huge amount of money to get in front of a qualified traveler. I think those guys were brilliant. But there's plenty of examples, and again, it's the power of why I'm so bullish on social commerce is once I started to look at properties like that, the algorithm started showing me more properties that were similar to that. And I started to be shown more and more things. So, the technology is kind of helping me discover in a way that maybe I wouldn't have done in the past.
All right, I'm going to look it up and maybe we'll speak next from the Dolomites.
That'll be great.
Thank you for this really wonderful conversation, Jeremy. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast, talking about social commerce, talking about social media. It is one of our Skip's big mega trends for this year. So it was a real pleasure having you. For our listeners, if you enjoyed, we're speaking of social media. I have to do the call to action. Speaking of social media, please remember 5 stars, like and subscribe, whatever platform you're on. Leave a comment. Get that algorithm working for us. We just heard about it. So thank you so much for listening to the Skip Travel Podcast, and let us know if you have any questions or comments for future episodes. Thanks, Jeremy.
See you next week, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Skip Travel Podcast. Wherever you're listening, please make sure to subscribe. If you like what you're hearing, rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review. It really helps get the word out about us, our podcast, and make sure that we can still continue to bring it to you free of charge every week.
If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell as well. That way you'll know every time we have a new episode.